Good evening and many thanks for joining us. Welcome to Impact Kenya, your brand new television series that gives you an opportunity to be heard and hold your leaders accountable. Tonight on the show, we focus on the implementation of the competence-based curriculum. Is the country ready for this new education system? My name is Jason Nyantino, and I've got a fantastic panel that is going to unpack these questions tonight, which are going to come from the audience, drawn from different parts of this country. We have people coming in from Bungoma County, Nandi County, Samburu County, and of course, Nairobi County. Welcome aboard. Let's get to know who is on the panel tonight. Dr. Evelyn Jepkemei. She is an educational leadership and policy expert with a wide experience in research, curriculum development, education policy, and strategy. She nurtures a keen interest in education for liberation and self-reliance. Dr. Jepkemei, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Next in line is Dr. Andrew Riechi. Dr. Riechi is a senior lecturer, University of Nairobi's Department of Educational Management, Policy and Curriculum Studies. He is a researcher and policy analyst with over 20 years experience in educational leadership, teaching, research in Kenya and several African countries. Most welcome to the show, Dr.
Thank you very much.
Last but not least, Eunice Victoria. She is the founder and CEO, Skills to Grow Africa, from where she mentors, empowers, and motivates young people to achieve full potential. Eunice is passionate about education, technology, and health, and has over 10 years' experience in training, public relations, and journalism. Eunice Victoria, welcome to the show. Let's welcome our panel tonight. Before we go to our first question, let's have a look at this video. The switch from the 844 system of education to the new competence-based curriculum, commonly referred to as CBC, was endorsed by many Kenyans in the hope that it will enhance knowledge and hone skills among our children in a much more effective way than the 844 system did. Touted as practical, as opposed to the examination-oriented 844 system, CBC has been celebrated as a system that unlocks the creative potential of our children, as opposed to one that leaves them with labels of failure if they do not pass exams.
Children didn't know how to function when their parents are not near.
Ukilinganisha hii ya sasa ni kama ile ya zamani, kama polytechnic. Mtoto alikuwa anaenda, kama ni carpentry anasoma, kama ni mason anaenda anasomea huko. Akitoka huko anajua kujenga.
CBC, it's nice because it nurtures the kid. For example, how to cook, how to sweep. But it's a little bit expensive.
Critics are saying that schools will require significant preparation in terms of infrastructure, teacher training, and development of teaching and learning content.
Tungepewa muda ndio tungejua. Sasa tuwezi compare tujue juu tujepewa mafunzo ya kutosha.
Most of the time printing things in cyber and doing this is so expensive.
We were not sensitized so much about the CBC.
Could the planned switch to CBC turn out to be a case of jumping from the frying pan to the fire? We find out tonight on Impact Kenya. Many thanks. Those are views from a cross-section of Kenyans with regard to the competence-based curriculum. We'll take our first question tonight on Impact Kenya from Konya Xavier. Konya is a student.
How do you bridge the gap between the learners of the 844 system and the CBC? Because I'm thinking during transition, there's bound to be some information that will be lost.
Transition from 844 to CBC. What are the gaps? Dr. Jepkemei.
In my view, there is no gap. There is no gap that, in this sense that education prepares, or at least ought to prepare, the learner for the future. Okay, and so as a learner, one needs to come out of the school system understanding their environment, understanding themselves, and understanding opportunities and responsibilities that they have. When I look at many of you, and I know many of you are 844 graduates, I don't think that there is any gap. We have people who have come out of 844 and have done outstanding things. And so, in my view, there is no, I wouldn't say necessarily that there is a gap.
Thanks, Dr. I want to move across to Dr. Riechi. You talked about summative assessment, and I know it's related to formative assessment. Could you just clarify those two as you define what really competence-based curriculum means for the Kenyan people? What does it actually mean?
What my colleague said about summative, the report on summative evaluation of the 844, that is a landmark report that was done at the end, after 844 reached a complete cycle. And it pointed out strengths and weaknesses. I think that needs to be clear. But not all Kenyans are even aware of that report, which is the basis, among other reports, including the Professor Douglas Odhiambo Task Force report that recommended Kenya should implement CBC. So what was the other question?
But define CBC, because CBC, so many people don't know what CBC is.
As Evelyn said, competence-based curriculum is more about teaching the content in a different way so that we can focus on tangible things, some results, not mean scores, not academic grades, but outcomes. Outcomes means, include what can students do, all right? Something tangible, which has not been the focus of Kenya's education since 1963 when we became politically
So in a sense, we are saying the 844 system, as Dr. Jepkemei also pointed out, that it became so much academic-oriented or examination-oriented.
Absolutely, and that is one of the undoing. Okay. The concept of 844 was very good, but with the time, I remember parents complained, stakeholders raised a number of issues. Oh, children are carrying too many books to school. They are getting tired. Their teachers are getting exhausted. So they kept on removing some subjects, and that killed the focus of 844 and what it was intended to do.
Eunice, what has been your experience with CBC? Because there's a lot of debate around it. Kids are being told to beg in school, beg at home, carry this to school. What has been your experience about CBC?
Honestly, I was telling my colleagues earlier that actually I love the idea of CBC. And they were like, yes, yeah. And they're telling me, how about implementation? The idea could be good, but is it being implemented? When I checked, when I read about CBC and, with the experience with my kids and my nephews and nieces, what I think CBC is doing is trying to nurture this kid and involve other stakeholders around this child. So teachers are teaching in school or, training or, nurturing them in school, but are there other people in this child's life that can help us understand, what is the strength of this child?
The learning process.
Yeah, so that's where we involve the parents, the siblings, and so on. From my experience, honestly, I love the creativity aspect of it. Maybe just because my nephews and nieces are highly creative people, and it also makes you want to get involved and understand really. Oh, you love to do this. It makes you really understand the child in another aspect. I was just trying to look at what the question that was asked earlier about the gap between how to bridge the gap between
844.
And this will answer, this question you've asked will answer this because I work with 844 graduates from high school, from campus. And sometimes I look at this person, yes, they're telling me I graduated 4 years ago and I've not gotten a job, I've tried, and I ask, what have you been doing? They tell me nothing. Okay, what do you love doing? I don't really understand. Then what were you doing as a child? I really loved reading, I could sing, and so on. And then when I work with this person, trying to get back.
I can see Professor Riechi smiling, and I know that's so familiar. Professor Riechi, sorry, I cut you short. I just wanted to pick what is in his Dr. Riechi's his mind.
What she's saying is totally true about our education system, which I often, without any apologies, describe as an examination system. Because graduates come out, they don't possess skills. They have few things that they can do. And it's not their mistake, but it's the kind of education they are given, which focuses on exams. Recently, I was on teaching assessment, of our students who are on teaching practice. And in one school, I don't want to name it, I could see posters all over, including classrooms. Kick these out of this school.
Yeah.
That's an announcement.
It's a motto, it's a serious thing. I could see it in the principal's office, all over, in other schools, this year's mean score is this. When they acquire that, and the fact that most stakeholders in our education system do not even understand or do not know the national goals of education. What is education about? They don't know the goals of the objectives of each level of education. So teachers are not using the KICD curriculum booklet, which specifies the objectives of the subjects and the topics. They are using what they call NEC, Kenya National Examinations Council syllabus, which is not a syllabus. Those are guidelines to show what exams will cover. So even if I had chance to ask some of the audience, do you know what the national goals of education, number 8? Very few will have an idea. My colleague has, my friend has already said no.
Maybe before I go for our first break, Dr. Jepka, may just give us a slight difference on how CBC assesses and how 844 assesses. Just 1 minute before we go for a break. Then we'll pick it up after the break.
I don't know how CBC assesses for now, because we're still at that formative stage. We're trying to figure out. I think the information that we have so far is that the summative evaluation is going to be multiple choice, and that the overall grade or score will be 60% school-based and 40% national-based. 844, we all know KCPE, we all know KCSC. But I think after we go for break, I think I would like to talk about why no system is necessarily examination-oriented.
Yes. Yeah. We'll come back to you, Daktari. Impact Kenya takes a break. Don't go away. Welcome back to Impact Kenya with me, Jason Nyantino. This is a show that gives you an opportunity to be heard. Tonight, we are focusing on the implementation of the competence-based curriculum, which is going on across our schools in the whole of this country. Dr. Jepkame, you were saying something that not all education systems are examination-oriented. Can we pick it up from there?
Yes. So my argument is that no country designs its education system to be examination-oriented. I think if you look at education literature, you will notice that almost 70% of the countries are struggling with high stakes examinations. And even when, let's look for example at the US, when Bush was president, he started No Child Left Behind. Obama came with his. And even when those changes happen, somehow the new model of education falls into high stakes testing, because testing is used culturally and traditionally as a sieve to decide who goes to the next level. And so 844, when it started, as Riechi said, it was actually meant to de-emphasize examinations, because the previous system was said to be preparing students for white-collar jobs, which were not existent, okay? And therefore, it was more practical-oriented. What happened to 844? Number one, it became very expensive, because to be able to undertake practical pedagogies, you require heavy investment. So it became expensive for parents, and I think you already had some parents complaining about the cost. It also became very cumbersome for the teachers, and the burden, the curriculum burden for the children was too heavy. So when the monitoring assessments were done, it came out that all the teachers were doing were actually trying to do the bare minimum. And so there wasn't, what I would say authentic learning going on. So what happened? We reduced the number of subjects. We reduced also the practical side of subjects. In fact, we completely removed the technical schools from the curriculum, and then we focused now on kind of didactic kind of teaching, where who then succeeds in this system? Before that, whoever succeeds is the person who gets the skills, okay? Who knows how to do, the kazi ya mikono here and there. But eventually, it became the person who scores an A. And so that brings me to the point that Riechi was making, that when you go to schools, every school is trying to kick out the Ds, because success is defined by the A's, the B's, and the C pluses, okay? Because we have said nobody with a D can go to higher education. Okay. Primary, we are saying nobody with 300 will go to a good school. Yet, 50% of the mark is 250. So essentially, anybody getting 250 has 50%. That ought to be a pass. But because the opportunities are very slim, then it becomes very competitive. And so we focus more on making these kids pass that particular exam because of the opportunity.
Because it's a measure of success.
Exactly.
All right. Yeah. Let me take my second question from Paul Otoma. Paul, your question, please.
President Uhuru Kenyatta, during the recent Madaraka Day celebration, said that Kenya won't be going back to 844 system. Are our teachers sufficiently trained to ensure 100% transition from 844 to CBC?
So teacher training, Dr. Riechi, you want to take that?
First of all, I want to totally agree with our president that is the best thing that will ever happen, that Kenya will continue implementing competence-based curriculum. And I always say that had we implemented it in 1963, Kenya could be either a middle income country or a newly developed country, a newly industrialized country, NIC as it's called in economics. So, but because we pursued what we know, just academic-oriented, score grades and so on, being the ultimate goal, we lost it. So the cost is a challenge, but, and this is why I was a little concerned with our presidential candidate, one of the presidential candidates who said that Kenya, when he becomes president, he will make education free. From down there, from early childhood level to university. It is curious, I'm curious as an education economist, where shall we generate the resources to support a very demanding but extremely critical and appropriate system of education called CBC.
Maybe to bring you back to the CBC and the teacher training aspect. I was looking at the statistics. CS George Magoha, the CS for Education, said that they have already trained 60,000 teachers to implement CBC. And we all know that we have almost 300,000 teachers, almost 3/4 of them in primary school. And TSC recently said they already have 1 billion shillings to train. So do you think the right resources are going to the teacher empowerment as far as this curriculum implementation is concerned?
The first part I would ask, I would say, Japanese and listeners, when those statistics indicate that some teachers have been trained, and what I know Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development has been doing in collaboration with other stakeholders, they have actually been orientating teachers, which I may not call really training, effective training, but it's a good thing that has happened to give them, to orientate them to CBC. But the training, I think, will have to be an ongoing thing. And I'm glad that the University of Nairobi's Faculty of Education is collaborating with 2 universities in Finland to improve the pedagogical skills of lecturers in 60 universities in Kenya, including Strathmore, Apuani, and others.
Thank you.
So, actual training will consume a lot of resources, and that's why we need to look elsewhere, not only government.
Thank you. Now, I wanted to introduce a new aspect in terms of teachers, and I'm going to come to you, Victoria. Teacher shortage.
The issue of teacher shortage is just, I feel like it's just a minor issue, because also, as I work with graduates, there are so many teachers also graduating. I think the issue here is, do you have enough, they call it financial, support to hire more teachers, or also to empower those who are already in. And you see, if the teachers who are already teaching, the 844 system, are the same ones who, in public schools, if they are the same ones having, teaching the new CBC system, then, there's going to be an issue and a gap. So I feel like there are actually enough people, enough trainers and enough teachers who can be, empowered to teach and to give, these skills.
Now, Dr. Jifkamei, there's a comment you made recently. I'm just trying to, you were talking about CBC and facilities in our institution, where you say that our schools are just not ready for CBC implementation because it's so involving in terms of resources. I want you to tie that in with the current $1 million question. What is going to happen in January 2023?
I'm actually concerned as an educator in this country that we don't seem to have a very clear path of what is going to happen at the end of this year when the children transition from.
As you answer that, I got a comment here from the chairman, so that you tie that in. The chairman, Kenya Secondary School Heads Association, Head Teachers Association, Kahi Indimuli. This is what he said recently: congestion in secondary schools will reach crisis levels if infrastructure is not expanded by next year. That is a teacher himself, is a principal, I think, Machako School. And this is what he has to say.
Yes, I happen to be a board member of several schools in this country. And I'm aware of the challenge of accommodation for children. But I'm also aware of the fact that we have close to 12,000 secondary schools in this country, and we have about 34,000 primary schools, I believe. We do have a shortage of 114 teachers, by the way. And so we already have a congestion. In one of the schools that I'm a member of the board, we have been forced to create another classroom We are supposed to be as a 5-stream school. We have had to create an extra classroom, which is not official, to allow the teacher to be able to manage the size of the children. And Kai Ndimuli is a principal and is a representative of the school heads. The truth is, we don't have enough classrooms to be able to accommodate a double intake at basic education. There is just a problem that we need to agree as a country that we are facing this challenge, come to the round table and say, what do we do? I would propose that the children who are transitioning to senior secondary school remain in primary, because we still have those two classrooms that they would have gone into, but if they were in 844, the class 7 and class 8. And then we need to make a decision, because when we say that kids will be day scholars, how can children from 34,000 schools be day scholars in 10,000 schools? In my home, the nearest secondary school is about 10 kilometers away. So I'm just wondering, how will these kids be, will they be walking? How will they be?
So it's very interesting, Dr. Listen to this. The CS for Education has been talking about building 10,000 classrooms. When I was doing the math, we have about 1.3 million kids in grade 6 now. And that includes my daughter. So that tells you how serious this matter is to me as a person. If you divide 1.3 million, divide by 10,000 classrooms, you will get about 125 kids in one class, which is not possible. So really, Dr. Riech, I'm coming to you. Is the government saying the correct thing? Is it getting this thing right?
The government does not seem to have the data about schools and availability of resources, the number of teachers at their fingertips. Apart from seeing them moving from one school to another, from the CS to their top officials, instead of collecting the statistics and spend more time analyzing the data, where can we put more resources and why, and so what else can we do? Do we have, like she was proposing, can we use some of the primary school facilities which are in excess to put some, to begin with, some junior secondaries.
Thank you. Time for our second break. You're watching Impact Kenya with me, Jason Nyantino. Tonight we are focusing on the ongoing implementation of the competence-based curriculum. Are we ready for this new educational system, and what is it that we need to do? It's a good time to have you as part of our conversation, because on this show, we give you an opportunity to be heard. By answering this question, do you think our secondary schools will be ready for the double intake of grade 7 and Form 1 students in January 2023? Do you think our secondary schools will be ready for the double intake of grade 7 and Form 1 students in January 2023? Text with the keyword starting impact. Use the contacts on your screen, and you can also use our social media handles which are running on your screen at the moment. We will be back shortly. Welcome back to Impact Kenya with me, Jason Nyantino. Tonight we are assessing our readiness as a country for the competence-based curriculum that is being implemented, the CBC. Our next question is from Vincent Ochieng, who is a medical officer. Vincent, your question, please.
Most parents are financially unstable, yet CBC demands a lot of these parents, especially for printing of learning material and other practicals. What are the measures taken for such vulnerable in the society?
Thank you. I'll come to you, Eunice. Parents, it has been a subject of discussion online and everywhere that it's so expensive to do this. What do you have to say?
Think about this child and think about this child in the next 10 years. how are you going to help this child? So it's not really about you and the issues I'm having. It's about helping this child. And there are other ways you can look for some funds to help your child get what is expected, so that make this CBC works for them. Honestly, I feel like that's not an excuse on why we should not help a child learn in class. Yes, there are parents who live hand to mouth, which there are actually, but in that case, maybe governments can come in. However, I think as a parent, just try to also, look for resources somewhere where we can help the child and make it work.
Dr. Riechi, there's actually a document by KICD, Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, on parental engagement as far as CBC is concerned. I was going through it, and this is what I found out. They have defined parental engagement as the active participation of parents in their children's learning and holistic development. What do you have to tell the Kenyan parents as far as CBC is concerned?
The educational outcomes of a learner is largely influenced by the level of education of his or her parents, especially the mothers. Now, so we have to understand their educational background, their knowledge background, right, or backgrounds. That is one thing. Do they understand what CBC requires? Do they have some knowledge regarding what they can do? Secondly, there is a problem in the country, in Kenya, because parents have been made to understand since the reintroduction of free primary education or free education, parents said hallelujah. So their hands are supposed to be off because the government
is paying everything.
So the concept of free primary, free education, including what we have been promised, free education in Kenya, is something which is our undoing. Because we need to even call it subsidized, so that we can change the thinking of parents that they also need to chip in. But free is actually political. Thirdly, there is need for the government and stakeholders to rapidly move into ways of innovative ways of addressing challenges affecting communities. So if we went to the root causes of some of those challenges, where there's no water, the solar energy, large solar panels can be developed to drill water. Otherwise, it's not realistic that the government can provide all the resources, especially for CBC.
Thank you. Let's get to hear from the audience. It's a young audience tonight, and I'm sure there are one or two things to say about CBC. Any question that you want to field?
Okay, I would like to ask a question about what has been done to incorporate the private schools into CBC. Because I teach in a private school currently. For the public schools, you might get that textbooks have been given to the teachers. But for us, I get a subject like I'm supposed to teach music and art, which I have never learned anywhere in my life, but I have no textbooks. And then I'm still finding that I am working with almost the same as the 844 system. I've seen a lady speaking in the video saying that you find a child is doing only music because that's what they're passionate about. But that is not what is happening currently. So I don't know if I'm the one working on rumors or it's them.
Thank you. Give her a clap. That's a really good.
My question is to Dr. Rieti. You said that the 844 curriculum started off well, then along the way some subjects were dropped. So how sure are we that subjects are not going to be dropped in the CBC curriculum?
Dr. Jepkemei, private schools, have they involved properly in the CBC implementation?
I actually want to say that I think there's a problem in how we understand what CBC is. And perhaps that problem is more pronounced in private schools than in public schools. However, my thinking is, and she asked, am I the one who is operating on rumors or is it them? I think everybody seems to be operating on some kind of untruth about what CBC is. I think, and when you look at the meaning of CBC across the board, it means different things for different countries. Other countries are calling it outcomes-based education, others are calling it, whatever they are calling it. We need to define what CBC is all about. Now, coming to the question of private schools, there's a tendency in Kenya of private schools coming last, unfortunately, even though they actually support by taking the burden off of the public system when it comes to educational programs. I happen to know a good number of owners of private schools who are actually also struggling to understand what they need to do to be able to, to be able to actually prepare the learners. And so my thinking is that this is something that perhaps the Ministry of Education can look into and make sure that the private schools are equally engaged, just like the public.
Thank you. Dr. Riechi, very quickly, because I'm running out of time, there was a concern. The 844 was watered down. Yes. How sure are we about CBC?
One, it's our prayer that it will not be watered down. One problem that led to the watering down of 844, I remember very well. At that time, the government listened to the feelings of the people and removed those subjects which were key.
So it was political interference.
It was kind of political, but I want to believe that the CBC has been better conceptualized than the 844.
Allow me to take just one question from this side because I've run out of time. There's a forest of hands.
According to me, from where I'm standing, I've got a CBC little daughter. My rural area is, there's no power. They are told to go and print some things from the cyber. And he asked me that where do we get these printouts? So to me, this system of education is for the rich to be more rich and those who are not going to go to school to be swept away out of school. That is according to me. So that is what the implementers of this thing are keen in doing. To put people out of school. Thank you.
Thank you. So it's creating a class society according to him. Eunice, what do you think? Very quickly, then you give your closing remark.
There are people who operate around this child. Kuna parents, there is teachers, there is neighbors, and so on. So to enable this child to actually, become who we want him or her to become, then there's some resources that we need, okay? So that's why you're told, please buy so that we help this child. It's for the child. Though you're right about these resources being very, very expensive, and we've been saying that, we can't even implement some of the things that we have in plan. I mean, as CBC, advocators. But at the end of the day, it's just for the child.
Your closing
My closing remarks is just on children with special needs. Why I love this curriculum is because you're still going to focus. There are children with special needs or, like autism, we have ADHD, bipolar, and also learning disorders. This curriculum is so good for them because now we are going to focus on their strength, and at the end of the day, we are going to have a child who is able to also fend for themselves. So I feel like this curriculum, it needs to be implemented. We need to find ways of getting more resources, find ways of helping parents who cannot, get these resources and so on. But let's try as much as possible. Let's try our best to, get resources and help our children, try to buy these things that, we are told to buy. And also teachers try to understand this curriculum, because sometimes as a teacher, you're just reading, the textbook and say, enda ununue, and now as a parent, you don't understand why. Sometimes also work together so that you understand why you need these resources.
Dr. Riechi, your closing comment.
I think the best thing that has ever happened recently in this country is the implementation of CBC. If some of these challenges CBC is facing at the home levels and at the institutional levels, can be addressed, I think it's the best thing that has happened. There is need for the government to shape up in terms of provision of public utilities, including power, electricity, and other stakeholders. There is need for parents to be a bit innovative.
Thanks, Dr. Riechi. Dr. Jepkemei, I think as you give your closing remark, also give us examples or two where CBC has succeeded and maybe 1, 2 where it has not succeeded as we finish the show.
Okay. Let me start with the examples. So Kuwait is one of the countries that I would pick very quickly, who tried. It didn't work. They retreated and left it. Tanzania here. Rwanda has adopted CBC, but they have somewhat modified it in the way they have, in the manner in which they have approached it, such that it's not essentially learner-centered. It's not completely learner-centered. It's a hybrid of teacher-led and learner-centered. So they've so if it was here in Kenya, I would say they have picked 844 and they have, introduced a little bit of CBC. The other places where CBC has succeeded is actually in higher education, where you're actually training people for skill. CBC at basic education is a little bit tricky, and you can see why we are struggling. I can understand where my brother is coming from when he says that this system is meant to create the rift. I think the idea is not necessarily to create the rift, but that rift will come because of the cost. And we know there are families that are sleeping without food. So before someone has 5 shillings to go and use it to print a document, there is the Maslow hierarchy of needs. You have to take care of the basic needs first before you take care of those other needs. So it is a real concern. And when we are changing the education system, we must assess our economy and see that the economy is able to support. Where we are in Kenya at this time, our economy cannot be able to support the kind of education system that we have.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and that's where the curtain falls for this week's edition of Impact Kenya with me, Jason Nyantino. It was wonderful having you watching us from home. We had a wonderful panel and a fantastic audience that came from different parts of this country. It's a good time to be part of this conversation, even from home as you're watching us, by answering this question: do you think our secondary schools will be ready for the double intake of grade 7 and Form 1 students in January 2023? Do you think our secondary schools will be ready for the double intake of grade 7 and Form 1 students in January 2023? Text your answer to the contacts on your screen. Begin with the word impact. It will be good to know what you think, and we'll do this again next week on Impact Kenya. Be sure to join us. I am Jason Nyantino. Good night.